Dale McKenzie. I joined the Navy in 1943. I joined on what they call a baby cruise. I was 17. So then I was due to get out the day before I was 21 years old. That wouldn't finish that enlistment. So, but I had to have my parents' permission for this. It went fine. So when I got my boot camp in Farragut, Idaho, and took 12 or 16 weeks, I forget exactly, then I wanted to be a diesel mechanic. Well, the Navy just said, we don't need diesel mechanics, we need medics. So you are a medic. So I was transferred from Farragut, Idaho to Balboa Park in San Diego, California. I took 16 weeks medical training, and then I had a choice of a hospital I wanted to be assigned to, which I picked Seattle Naval Hospital. Then, with the orders of people going overseas or transferred, being a Navy medic, I was subject to go in to the Marine medics. Well, I missed the Marine medic by 3 names on a list. So I put in, volunteered for Seattle duty. Well, I was very lucky. I got in CAWTS War Training Aviation Service, and I was sent to Yakima, Washington on independent duty. I was there 4 months. Then I was transferred to Livermore Air Station in California. There I was then transferred to independent duty school in Portland, Virginia. I had 16 weeks of independent duty school. Then they didn't know where to send me, so they sent me to Farragut, Idaho, for Great Lakes, I'm sorry, for waiting orders. Well, I was in Great Lakes for 6 weeks, and then I had orders to go to board the USS Rescue hospital ship in Brooklyn. So we commissioned, they were just working on it. We commissioned that, went on a shakedown cruise. And as we was going over to Europe, we was given orders to change direction and go through the Panama Canal to Admiral Halsey's fleet in the Pacific. Well, we went through a hurricane in the Caribbean, then found out our ship was top heavy. It was a converted liner, a real old ship. So they went to Pearl Harbor, took all the wood off the structure on the top. Then we went to Ulysses Atoll waiting orders. Well, being that we was delayed with that work in Pearl Harbor, USS Relief took the rescue's place in Okinawa. But as they was pulling out of Okinawa, a kamikaze hit them and it disabled the ship for a while. But that was in our position. But then we managed to get to Okinawa. We was there for 2 weeks. And we had bombing every morning and every night. Then a lot of the bombs went close. They buckled some plates on the ship, but we took on 800 patients. When we took them to Guam, and the bilge pumps was keeping the water out of the bilge, and then we transferred up to Saipan and Tinian to wait for orders to go into dry dock at Guam to repair the buckled plates. But while we was sitting at Tinian and Saipan, that's when the Enola Gay took off from Tinian. We didn't know it. Then, but we was then sent.
How'd you know? How'd you find out the bomb was dropped?
Well, afterwards,
How did you find that out?
It was, well, we was at sea, and over the radio, the skipper announced the bomb was dropped, and then a few days later they announced the war was over. Well, we always kept a supply of beer, so when we had island parties, we could have some beer to drink, but never aboard ship. Well, that night the skipper said, everybody gets 2 bottles of beer aboard ship. So we really enjoyed that. But after that, we was transferred or ordered out of the fleet, and we went to Japan to take on prisoners, of our prisoners, and we took on, they just streamed through the ship. They stripped them down, took all their clothes, gave them new clothes, fed them, and some of those guys were so thin, they ate a half bushel of spaghetti at one time.
Now these were U.S. soldiers who were prisoners of war?
Oh, yes. There was everything.
And they were in Japan?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I've got many pictures of it. Then we took a load of TB patients to Pearl Harbor, unloaded, and then we took anything that had to go back to the States soon. But we made 7 trips from Honolulu to Frisco with dependents, prisoners, patients, everything. Then, that was in December 46 that I was discharged in. I was supposed to get out the day before I was 21, which has been the 1st of December, but I had 26 days or 24 days terminal leave, so my discharge date was Christmas Day, 1946. So I can't forget that. Then I got out, we came back to Minnesota, and things didn't go really right. I went in the painting business. Then in 49, grain prices dropped so drastically, I lost many paint jobs overnight. So I was talking to the recruiting sergeant. He said, well, being you was trained in the Navy, I can give you the equivalent rank that you was discharged with, which was 2 years and 8 months before. And I thought, and we decided, and there was no other work to be had at that time. Because when I did try to go to school, I was a year after all the reserves. So what did I get? Not another GI. Get out of here, our schools are full. A radio school, electrical schools, sheet metal, everything. So then I decided to go back in. So I was in the Army then for 8 years, with a break in between. But then our rank was hard to get, and they was taking reserved officers, and they wanted to stay in, so they put them down as master sergeants in our slots, which took up our promotions. So I decided the Air Force wasn't doing that. So I switched over to the Air Force.
Was that hard to do?
No, because I was repaired and installed medical and dental equipment.
Now, was this before or after the Korean War?
Oh, this was...
Remember offhand?
50.
So it was after?
4.
Were you ever over to Korea?
Well, I switched over in 56.
Oh.
June 56 to the Air Force.
Now, did you ever end up near Korea during?
No.
50s? Okay.
My wartime was in World War II, but I was in the service during Korea and Vietnam. So, but then I'd done 12 years in SAC command throughout, ended up in Morocco, and before when I was in the Army, I went through Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
So did I.
Pardon?
So did I.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Well, then from there I went to, oh, let's see, I should have wrote all this down, I guess, to
Yeah,
get it straight. But anyway, then from Fort Loyal Wood, I ended up in Fort Sam Houston. And then from Fort Sam Houston in Texas, I was transferred to Free Territory Trieste, Allied military government in a little city between Yugoslavia and Italy at the north end of the Adriatic Sea. I was there for 2 years, and then with some difficulty.
Were you still in the medics then?
Yes, I was in medics all the way through.
Okay.
Then I got out of the Army 54, was out a year and a half, stayed in reserves, and then went back in. And then after 2 years, I transferred over to the Air Force in grade. So then I stayed till my retirement, with a total almost 24 years, a month short of 24 years.
Now, were you a medic in Vietnam?
Yes, I was a medic, but not in Vietnam.
On a boat?
I was in Vietnam. I was in the Air Force. Yeah, I was in Morocco and Free Territory, Puerto Rico. I put 3 years in Puerto Rico also.
But you didn't have to go to Vietnam then at all?
No.
Oh, okay.
Because I was in the other European command then.
Oh, okay.
So, but then I ended up 3 years in Puerto Rico, and then I was back in Spokane, the Fairchild Air Force Base. And a friend of mine in the SAC headquarters called me one day and said, he said, you got orders for Vietnam. And at that time, before that, if we had orders for overseas and was retirement age, we could retire. But they changed that. So then he said, if you don't retire now, you'll be a good year in Vietnam. I said, put me in for retirement. So then I retired. We came to Bemidji, and I ended up working at the college for 17 years in electrical maintenance.
Where are you from originally?
Originally, I was born in Austin, Minnesota, raised around Rochester, and from then on I was, well, in a little while around Red Wing, and because my wife Fran is from Red Wing.
Okay, so you're living in your backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to speak.
So, other than that, that's about my whole story. There's other little fine details.
Yeah.
But that's...
No, that kind of rounds it off. We'll look at some pictures here in a second.
All right.
We'll go from there. Thank you very much, Dale.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to go to many schools for automatic film processing. I went through Kodak in Rochester, New York, in their main factory, and also for Ritter Dental Units. I went through their factory in Rochester, New York. So there was pretty good experience.
I guess so.
And interesting.
Thank you.
This is a picture on the orthopedic ward, and these are pilots and their crews that had been in an accident off a carrier. And we ended up with many, many broken legs and arms and some very bad fractures. These are prisoners that came out of the camps. They slept on the decks until we could process them. They stripped all their clothes, deloused them, and give them new clothes. They had no personal property at all that it could keep. Then they went into processing. Now this is the USS Rescue, our ship. Like we said, left from New York through Panama Canal, and with Admiral Halsey's fleet. It was the fastest hospital ship the Navy had at that time. It would go flank 28 knots to keep up with the battleships. Otherwise, it's a whole converted liner. So it was wasn't a really good ship. Only advantage, it had twin screws, which General Admiral Halsey wanted because it was fast and maneuverable. This is after we left Okinawa, this is at Guam, had to unload the 800 patients, go to the hospital there for triage and separation, and we unloaded 800 patients in an hour and a half.
Wow.
So this is loading the ambulances by the ship. Okay, this is getting prepared to take patients off of 2 ships at one time by lines between the ships, which was a pretty delicate operation, especially if the seas was rough. Now this is a patient going across on the line. That thing is a carrier next to us. And the 2 ships, the water pressure between them sometimes got really rough. We had one patient dip down in the water, I think 3 times before they got him across. Otherwise, no one was ever hurt. This was part of the trips that we took in the Pacific, and over almost 2 years' time. So we covered, I think they said, 475,000 miles in that time. It seemed like it was, it was pleasant. The weather was always good. Only a couple of typhoons, but otherwise it was good. This is where ambulances are lined up to ship to take patients over to the hospitals on Guam. We just came back from Okinawa. So, like I said before, it was 800 patients in an hour and a half, which was about a record time, I think. This is the beer that the skipper said we could have. There was no beer allowed aboard drinking aboard the ship, except the day the war was over, we was allowed 2 beers, and everybody really enjoyed them. Many of the guys that didn't drink gave them to the other guys, for money, of course.
Francis, you were traveling with the
I was a military wife, and it was back when, in the early days, when we had to travel on our own with our children. The men went on ahead. In the Navy, it was just Dale and I, and we had the one baby. When we got out, we were in Spokane, Washington. We come across country. We had enough money for gas, but we couldn't eat, and we had to buy milk for the baby, and we went into civilian life. Well, then in civilian life, it was difficult, and when I had 2 children, I had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and he came home, he said, I just enlisted. I said, thank God.
Now you traveled with the kids all over?
All over.
So how many countries did you go to?
Went to Italy with 4 babies, 4 children. They were 6, 4, 2, and the new baby was born in July, and Dale had orders and left us in San Antonio for Italy. 6 months later, I had to get from San Antonio to New York, went by ship, 18 days at sea with these 4 young children, got to Italy, and we were stationed there, and when we returned to the States, we were back in San Antonio when he got orders again for Morocco, but then the oldest one was in 8th grade, and he left us there just around holiday time also. And then 6 months later, I had to sell a house. I had to drive the car to Charleston, had to ship the car. We went on military transport there where we sat around the edge and we ate rations. On the trip, we stopped at the Azores for breakfast. And the Portuguese cooks cooked a little different than what we were used to, and the eggs were so greasy that we couldn't eat it. We ate it. But our oldest son, he said, Ma, let's go back on the plane and have rations. And when we landed in Morocco, it was so desert, I thought I'm going to hate it here. I loved it. I was hired as a youth director for the base. And I kept the assistant youth director. Between this, a youth director, her husband was a captain. She and I, we managed the youth center and the teen club. We kept all the kids in. They couldn't go out the gate. It was up to the chapel, and it was up to the school, and it was up to us.
Anyway, they couldn't go outside the gate because of why?
No, in Morocco.
Now, do you remember what year this was roughly? 60s, 50s?
Morocco, what year?
50.
And Richard was
Okay.
eighth grade. Richard was 8th grade, he's 64 now.
So it's about the 50s or
Yeah.
something. Why
And-
couldn't you go outside the gate?
They could only go out the gate, we could only go out, now I drove on base, but I could not go out the gate to drive. He was the only one that was allowed to drive out the gate in Morocco.
Is it why, Moroccan law or what?
Well,
About 2 years.
yeah, but Morocco was a wonderful base. I enjoyed being with the kids, and we'd have dances for them with a jukebox. I know today the kids wouldn't be entertained that well, but then they were entertained with dancing with a jukebox, and we'd go on hay rides. I'd call for Air Force trucks, and I'd get 2 Air Force trucks or 3 if I needed, and they'd get straw on them, and they'd send a driver, and would load all these kids, and they thought they were going on a regular hay ride. My husband would volunteer, and I'd call and get a lot of the other parents to volunteer. We used to have a lot of fun in
Now,
Morocco.
where did your kids graduate at if they're all over the place?
We had our children graduate. Our oldest one graduated Omaha when Dale was in SAC there, and at SAC headquarters, and there Richard graduated, and he went in the Navy from there.
Where did they graduate? You said some graduated in Puerto Rico.
Then we went to Puerto Rico, and our second son graduated Puerto Rico, and our daughter graduated Puerto Rico. He left for the Marine Corps, and when she graduated, she left for Rochester for nurses training. Then when we went to our last base was, well, there I left ahead too, because I didn't want him to move in his senior year. Now, Warren had moved to Puerto Rico in his senior year. Darryl said, please don't let me do that. Well, Dad couldn't leave until November. So Dale had to cut orders for me, and Darryl, our youngest one, and I flew from Puerto Rico to the States. I picked a car up there that we had shipped from San Juan, and Darryl and I drove across country to Spokane. We're not allowed base housing because we weren't accompanied. I said, I'm going to try it. I went on to the base. I seen a corporal, and the corporal said, no, you can't. I've got orders. I showed orders. He said, well, you don't have, or your husband's not accompanied. I don't know about you getting housing. And I got up to leave, and a major stood up and came over, and he said, did I hear you come all the way from Puerto Rico to get this kid on the football team and to get him the senior year? He said, you got a house. That was quite a touching thing for me, and we got the house, and then I had to go check out bunks and check out a table and chair, but it had a refrigerator and stove in there. He got on the football team, and he got to start his senior year. And Dale came back then up there in the middle of November.